Native Trees, How to Select, Plant, and Help Them Thrive will be presented by two Master Gardeners, Amy Crumpton, who serves on the Public Education Committee for the Extension Master Gardeners of Arlington and the City of Alexandria, and as a park steward with the Arlington Regional Master Naturalist. She is chair of the Urban Forestry Commission for the City of Falls Church and a volunteer with the city's Neighborhood Tree Program. She's been a Master Gardener since 2015. We will also have Molly Newling, who qualified as a Master Gardener in 2013 after a lifetime of growing flowers and vegetables. She is especially interested in pruning woody plants and increasing the use of native plants in the landscape to support wildlife and improve the native ecosystem. Thank you so much, Amy and Molly, for being with us today, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Nicole. I noticed that we have a lot of tree stewards who are joining today, and that's fantastic. And I hope that if you all have comments about things that we're talking about, you please share with everyone. So we have a wealth of expertise, I believe, in our participants today as well. So Native Trees, How to Select, Plant, and Help Them Thrive. Well, first of all, I just want to do the public service announcement to let you know that as Master Gardeners, we are trained by the Virginia Cooperative Extension. And as Nicole said, there's a help desk that you can send in your concerns and issues, and a photo with that. Anything that you have also really helps the Master Gardeners there, help you figure out what's going on. We have plant clinics at farmers markets and even at one of the libraries. These classes we have are virtual at the moment, but we used to do them in the library. So we're hoping at some point we can get back to some of that. And we have a number of beautiful demonstration gardens throughout Arlington and City of Alexandria that showcase all kinds of native plants. They showcase sustainable landscaping techniques, vegetable gardening techniques. So if you have an opportunity, go to our website and you can see at mgnv.org, and you can see the plethora of extras that we have. At the end, I'll also talk about some more of the materials that we have online too. This Tried and True Native Plants for the Mid-Atlantic is a fantastic resource that has a lot of detailed information on plants, as well as a lot of the trees, native trees, so that you can get a little more information. It's a really nice thing to use. So what we're going to talk about today is, first of all, why trees matter. And probably many of you already are on that bus. You already know why they matter. That's why you're here. How to care for trees in an urban forest. And I'll take some questions after that. And then I'll be turning this program over to Molly, and she'll talk about determining the right place for a new tree in your yard, selecting the right native tree for your yard, and planting a tree 101. It's always good. I know many of you know how to do that already, but it's always good to have a refresher, because that's where sometimes the problems begin, is when the tree is planted. So why trees matter? Well, we know now from the wonderful uses of things like iTree that each tree that's out there, and this is not just native trees, but each tree that's out there is proving all kinds of ecological benefits and services for us in an urban environment. It intercepts a lot of stormwater, it sequesters carbon dioxide, it absorbs pollutants, produces oxygen for us to breathe, keeps the air temperatures cooler. They are very important for habitat. So the trees and stormwater is an issue, I think, that is plaguing many, particularly in the East Coast, but probably across the country, trying to slow stormwater down because of the torrential rains we're starting to have with climate change. And the tree canopy is very important, meaning the totality of the trees that we have in an area is very important in helping to slow that water down. And having enough permeable soils around these trees really helps get the water back down into the water table. A big tree like a mature hickory can actually filter almost over 11,000 gallons of water a year, which is amazing. So trees are very important for our hydrologic system in an urban environment. Trees and energy conservation is another one that has been highly discussed over quite a number of years. The EPA notes that in single-family homes, you can actually help to reduce the uses of your home energy by putting trees around the house and using them in a very strategic way. We also know that trees are very important in filtering pollutants, and helping people feel more at home, giving them a much nicer place to live, keeping things much cooler around your home. So they have an enormous role to play in helping the home energy conservation, and as well as energy conservation across an urban environment. And the urban forest, really, when we talk about trees, we're also talking about what an urban forest is. And an urban forest is sort of is more than the sum of its trees. It's also includes all your shrubs. It includes your herbaceous layer of plants. It includes your wildlife. The thing that's most important, I think, for us now that we understand a little bit better every year is that the totality of all of these trees making up our tree canopy layer is an important commons for all of us. And that commons is shared unequally, for sure. We have some neighborhoods that have a lot more trees than others. It's shared differently by land use. So we have, for example, in Arlington, only about 34% of the land is public land, so that's what the county has control over. The rest of it is going to be commercial and private properties, which is where you all come in, all the residents come in to try to make sure that you're helping to salvage trees and plant new trees on your own properties, because that's something that the governmental entities don't have the right to do, right? So in Arlington, the canopy coverage is about 41%, and that percentage number is always something there's different ways to calculate it. But at the moment in Arlington, they believe they've got about 41%. And the value of that canopy is over, it's about almost $1.5 billion, which is a huge social good. So the other thing that I just mentioned too is that we know now from all of the myriad numbers of papers that have been done by ecologists and conservationists that how important it is for native plants and particularly native trees to our wildlife. And in particular, native trees are supporting all of our Lepidoptera caterpillars. So those native woody plants, like the trees, provide a lot of food for young birds as they fledge from their nests. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this particular study done by Desiree Narango, looking at chickadees and how many caterpillars, just one female chickadee would need to feed her clutch, and it's something like 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars in one season. So many of our native trees, as Doug Tallamy has pointed out to us, support a number of different kinds of Lepidoptera. So they support a lot of insects that feed these birds. So we have recognized now how important it is for us to be putting in and replacing native trees in our regions. We're using the native trees. When I talk about native trees, I saw some of you are not just from the Northern Virginia area, but across Virginia, for sure, there are multiple campaigns on trying to look at the local ecoregion in which you're in and pinpoint what kinds of native plants tend to grow there. And so we're using the native plants for Northern Virginia, is where we're going to be showing you some of the trees that are common around here, but some of those trees will also be common in some of the other places in the state. That's why we're using native trees, not just because of all of the energy and stormwater, but the wildlife issue is very important. So I just want to make it very clear that when we're talking about trees, and we're talking about native trees, the next kinds of things I want to speak to are going to be about trees in general. I mean, if you've already got mature trees in your yard, those mature trees produce a lot of ecosystem services for us. They may not produce as much wildlife value, but they still have a lot of use in terms of providing shade and absorbing water and so forth. So I just want to make that clear that we're not advocating if you have a mature Norway maple to run, go and take it out and put in something native. Let that tree, run its course, and just make sure you keep the seedlings from spreading, pluck those out of your yard. Don't let those grow, and think through what the next tree will be and make sure that it's a native. So that in an urban environment, there are many sources of stress on trees. One, of course, is just simply the way we use our land. In particular, all of us know we've seen that houses have gotten larger on lots, and lots have gotten smaller as well. And so there's become less space sometimes around a single family home for a tree in a residential yard. There's been a 26% reduction in yard space from about 1978 to 2015 for a residential yard. The conventional land use practices, we remove trees and disrupt soil all the time. And this is a great cause of concern for people. This picture is what will drive people to go toward to city council or to the Urban Forestry Commission of their local jurisdiction, because it's very upsetting to see things just leveled. And that lot right there, had probably a good 20 trees on it, 20 mature trees on it. They're all gone. There may be a few left at the back, that kind of thing. The other thing that happens in an urban environment is that the way in which we take care of our yards is also causing long-term destruction. So if you have a lot of lawn around your trees, then you have a double whammy. In this particular case, the mowing, probably they had to use a riding mower, heavy mowing around these tree roots, compacts the oxygen flow, it compacts the soil, it reduces water to be able to get in. So this picture on the left was taken by Rod Simmons in the early 2000s, and he was using it as a great example of an old age remnant forest in an urban area. Well, I went back to that spot and, 20 years later, and as you can see, many of the trees have dead. Some have even been removed. I think that a lot of the practices that were on that yard probably contributed to the death of those trees, because they should have lived a lot longer than that. The other problem with lawns, of course, is that if you are trying to keep your lawn weed free, so to speak, or you're adding a lot of lime to it, which is calcium, and that raises the soil pH to make it more basic, and trees prefer a more acidic soil. So there's all kinds of problems between lawns and trees. That's a whole nother presentation about, removing your lawn as much as you can to allow trees to have more open permeable soil. The other poor practice that we have is, you've probably seen a lot of plant tree roots girdling. This is caused by trees being planted too deep. And on the right-hand side, you can see they've tried to dig down to find the tree root flare, and I'll show you that in a minute where that is. But you can see you're not even close to getting to the base of the trunk, and so that tree has been put too deep. So that again means that the roots will girdle. They'll be searching for oxygen, so they'll be coming up wherever they can to find it. They wouldn't be spreading out like they should from the trunk. Another practice that is just really shouldn't happen, because it's such an easy one to fix, is that folks will leave their guide wires on their trees for too long. This often happens, particularly in some kinds of commercial projects where contractors come in and put the trees in, and then nobody comes back to take the guide wires off. And those shouldn't be on for no more than a year, but even less. And Molly will speak to this a little bit more. But what that does is they cause moisture against the trunk. They can even start to dig into the bark of the tree. And as you can see, the tree on the left has multiple problems, one of which is the dreaded volcano mulching. That tree was just planted, dedicated a year and a half ago, and it's on its way out. But volcano mulching is probably one of our worst problems in an urban area, and perhaps even in rural areas, because it's a practice that just doesn't want to die. So what happens with volcano mulching is, again, you are pulling the moisture up the trunk because you've laid all this woody mulch up against the trunk, and you're causing the tree to misunderstand where the ground level is. And it'll start sending out roots, as this bottom one shows. This would happen over a long time, but it starts sending out roots above the root flare. It'll also start to rot the tree over time as well. So you can actually kill a tree this way as well. So this is one I know, once you understand what's going on, you'll see it everywhere. And it's like we can't quite get the landscaping companies to stop. So, but if you in your own yard, if you can avoid that, that would be great. The other thing that's really a problem is climate change, of course, and climate change is much bigger than any one yard. But what's happening around here, for example, we have oak decline, and that's being caused by tremendous amounts of rain, and then punctuated by tremendous period of drought. And what happens is that the root systems just can't really handle it. You kind of drown the root hairs on the roots, and then you dry them out. So this is one that we've begun to see. Particularly, it seems to be affecting a lot of white oaks in our area, but I suspect in different places in other areas, those kinds of climatic changes are affecting different kinds of species as well. Okay. So caring for trees in an urban environment. So what I'm going to talk about here are sort of the best management practices that everyone should do. And they're just crucial. If you know what you're doing with the best management practices, then when you do decide to plant in a new tree, you're good. So first of all, you really want to protect your tree roots. And as I mentioned before, you have this root flare on your tree at the bottom, at the base of the trunk. This is where the root system starts to spread out, right? And this is, you always want to be able to see this, okay? You never want to not be able to see this at the ground level. Trees are important because they have really large, extensive root systems. And most of these root systems are within the top, say, foot and a half inches of soil. And so that is a lot of people think they go down a lot further, but actually they're going out from the tree, because that's really how you keep the balance of the tree. You keep the tree from, it's the structure of the tree up. They extend out many times from the tree, the end of the tree's branches. And that, we always think of that as the drip line. So the drip line is right under the tree like this. And those roots that are out beyond that drip line are really what's really taking up the water, and they're looking and searching for nutrients. So understanding that your root system is beyond your drip line, that it is out into your yard, is important. The other thing is too, is as you've seen when I showed you the picture of the sort of the clear-cut lot, what happens with development is that when they are going in and looking to widen build a new house or whatever, they have to try to save a tree by making sure that they're going no more than beyond the critical root zone, which is usually about 1.5 times the tree trunk's diameter. And if you start to impinge upon that, if you're starting to dig further in than that root zone, then that means you're going to probably end up killing the tree. So in our area, you can see that, I know I've seen it many times. I'll see where they put the fencing around, to try to protect the tree. And I'm looking at the tree and where that fencing is, and the critical root zone is much further out. So it's kind of one of those issues that they never do it quite the way that we learn it as a best practice. But you can see why sometimes trees start to fail, or why they might take a tree out, because they're just digging too close into the tree. All right, so one of the best things you can possibly do for your trees is to leave the leaves from the tree. If you've got a deciduous tree, in the fall, when the leaves come down, leave them around the tree. That is the tree's own nutrient system, right? So don't break them to the curb, leave as many as you can around the tree. They'll break down, provide nutrients, they'll provide carbon to the tree, they'll protect the roots from the cold, they'll help build the soil structure and biome. They're free. You don't have to go get bags of mulch or whatever. And also, again, to reinforce how important this is to the life cycle of our wildlife, many insects lay their eggs in whole fallen leaves on the ground and overwinter in them, particularly our firefly populations. That's the one that usually gets talked about the most, but a lot of other insects do as well. Scott's Lawn has even started telling you can go ahead and mulch mow leaves on your lawn if you want to. If you just have so many, they've begun to at least offer that as a way to get some nitrogen into your lawn. But if you can leave them whole, if you can't leave them right under the tree, rake them gently into a plant bed or whatever, let those leaves help you work the soil, provide nutrients to your trees. Mulching properly, will probably be like a broken record on this one, but you don't want to mulch up against the tree trunk. You want to leave at least 6 inches. Some people, there's always argument about how far it all should be and so forth, but you want to leave at least 6 inches, maybe more, depending upon the size of the tree, where you can see that root flare that's visibly exposed. You want to do it maybe like a donut shape, 2 or 3 inches around the tree. And you want to make sure that you're always expanding that mulch circle as the tree drip line widens. So that's something that I've seen people don't really do. They'll keep just making that little 3-foot mulch circle around a tree, and the tree is now, much, much bigger. So if you can keep expanding that, then that's also a way you're actually probably taking out lawn as you go. And that's a good way to make sure that the tree is getting enough nutrients. You can also plant a ground cover, which is another way to help you actually not have to use as much mulch if you decide to use mulch. Again, you can use leaves. You can leave the leaves around the tree, mix them with some mulch. The best types of mulch really are the hardwood chip mulch that the arborists will chip up when they've taken down a tree. So there is getchipdrop.com. Some of you may have heard about that. They'll bring you a a truckload. So it's a great, it's a great neighborhood probably activity if you wanted to get a lot of these trees to help put these around your neighborhood. Fallen leaves, leaf mulch is great. Okay, the shredded hardwood mulch that we mostly use, you know, that we get in those plastic bags, is not the best, because what happens is if it doesn't get refreshed or broken up over time, it can actually kind of make a mat. It gets kind of blends together, makes kind of a mat that will dry out and not allow water through very well. So if you're using that, make sure you're kind of refreshing it. It's okay too, I should have put a picture in here. It's okay too, if you see that your mulch is turning white underneath, it looks kind of grubby and white, that means that it's starting to break down. That's part of the rotting process. So that is okay. Try to avoid around a tree things like bark mulch or any kind of bark nuggets or shredded bark mulch, because the bark on a tree helps repel water off of a tree. So using that doesn't help as much around the tree roots. You can use it. It's a great material though, if you want to use it as for a pathway in your yard. That's a good one to use there instead. Like I said, plant a green mulch. Putting some plants gently around your trees is a wonderful way to avoid, you know, any kind of mulching over time. If you have places that are just hard to get to, or you just don't have time, you know, put some plants around and allow those to also help you feed the tree roots. What you're trying to do with all of this is you're trying to change your soil structure. So in an urban environment, even if you have been in a house for a long time, your soil probably gets compacted. We certainly know that your soil is compacted after in a new development. When you see a new house, you know, you strip everything out and then they just roll out the lawn onto, you know, what looks like a lot of compacted clay. What happens is your soil gets compacted through whatever process, either through the development process or through just long-term use in the yard, use of the mower, that kind of stuff. And it will make these sort of platelets like this, which again, you know, they'll compile on top of each other and then water just can't get through. So then what happens when we have our horrendous storm events, water isn't able to really seep down into the soil. So what you're trying to do when you're putting in mulch, when you're putting in, you know, leaving the leaves and so forth and so on, is you're putting in a material that breaks down, that helps the soil turn into this more like these sort of particles. You want it to break those platelets up into these particles. And over time, it'll take a little time to do, but that's what you're heading for. Again, it allows water then to get into the water table. Removing turf grass. This has become a new mantra as well for a lot of discussion about native plants in general. Turf grass, as I mentioned, competes with a tree for nutrients. When you've got too much calcium or using calcium on your lawn, you are actually reducing the uptake of iron for a tree. So they just don't really mesh. So the idea, as I mentioned before, of widening your mulch circles around your tree, connecting, you know, your plant beds to your tree beds, those kinds of things, it actually allows you to take out some lawn, probably in a sort of more humane way for yourself, because that can be a real big issue if you've got a large lawn. Taking out parts of your lawn to provide mulch beds that would provide more ability for you to get nutrients to your trees and your plants. Again, you want those mulch beds to be up at least to the drip line of your tree. Avoid landscaping fabric. I have seen the use of this a lot, and it's just bad. One of the problems with people using landscaping fabric, or even using things like plastic or heavy kinds of materials, even cardboard can do this, is that they're trying to prevent weeds, right? But all it does is that it's supposed to allow water through, but it doesn't allow gas exchange well at all. And so it also, because it's a petroleum-based product, mostly these landscaping fabrics, when it starts to break down, basically you're just putting plastic into the environment, and they do break down into little itty bitty pieces. Forget this stuff. Just put mulch around your trees. Do not use this kind of thing at all. I think it really should be outlawed. Removing invasive plants. This is another huge issue in our urban environment. It's calculated that as much as 40% of the botanicals in an urban environment can be invasive. And in particular, the trees, the vines are really problematic. English ivy has been one that I know there have been campaigns on English ivy for decades, and we still have it. and it's still wreaking its havoc. So the first thing I would say for anybody's yard is to walk through it and find out what's going on in terms of any kind of vines growing up your trees. And if you've got things like English ivy, if you've got things like porcelainberry, work on getting those out of your trees. You cut a lifesaver ring that's about 2 or 3 feet from the ground, and you remove it from the ground, get it off of the ground so it doesn't grow up the tree any longer. You can leave what's already on the tree and it will just die back. And don't try to just strip it off of the tree, because you'll just take bark off of the tree, which won't be good for the tree. And always wear gloves and long sleeves, especially in our area. You stick your hand into some kind of situation like what you see here on the right, and there's bound to be some poison ivy in there. So be careful. A great place to go get information, there's a number of places, but one of the newer places to go get information is Plant Nova Trees has a nice rescue trees campaign going on. And they've got some good materials on identifying which vines are invasive and which ones are native, because we would like to make sure we keep our native vines, because they're very important in terms of their burying the berries that they provide for birds and other things they do for wildlife. So being able to identify those things is really important. Prune your tree correctly. There is a wonderful video by my colleague Molly. It's on the ngnv.org website, and she goes through all of the ways in which you correctly prune. But just at a minimum here, don't pop your tree, which is to basically cut the terminal leader of a tree. It will basically kill the tree. And this is done a lot on crepe myrtles. Probably some of you have seen this. They do this pollarding on a tree. It's dreadful for a tree, even a crepe myrtle, which I'm not that fond of, but I wouldn't want this to even happen to a crepe myrtle. So make sure you prune correctly. You need to prune out dead wood. In a young tree, the tree on the right was one that was planted, and then people just didn't pay any attention to it. They ended up removing it and putting in a Japanese maple, which was unfortunate because this was a little sweet bay magnolia, I think, in there. But again, just paying attention to what's going on, if things are growing up into your tree, if things are dying on your tree. This tree probably needed to be mulched properly. It needed water because it started to just look dreadful after a while. And water during droughts. This may not seem like the most obvious thing to do for the really big mature trees, but sometimes even our large trees can use some water when we're having one of our terrible, flash droughts. So signs of drought include, your canopy looks thinning, like it's thinning. The branches look like they're not doing well. Leaves are wilting, that kind of thing. If it gets way beyond that, your tree may be on its way out. But if you stick a screwdriver into the ground to check the soil moisture level, that's one way to, stick the screwdriver. If you can't get the screwdriver in, it probably means your soil is extremely dried out. But trying to get your finger down in there to see if you can feel any moisture. If it does feel moist, maybe about an inch or so below the ground level, you may be okay. But if things are really dry, remember to try to give your larger trees a drink as well. The best way to do that is to just take a hose out and put it on low and let it just drip or soak for at least half an hour, a week, maybe more if you've got a larger tree. Think about the watering of your trees from time to time. And particularly if you've got small trees, Molly will go over this some more. If you've got shrubs during our droughts, watering them is probably essential. This is just a good example of watering versus non-watering. These two houses were built at the same time across the street from me. 2 trees on the right-hand side, on the right house. They are actually at the end of the water coming off of the roofs from the downspouts. So water was running down and coming off. And actually the house on the left, its downspout too, the water was running off and coming to this tree. So these 2 trees were getting extra water, when it was raining, it was coming down to them. These 2 trees never got extra water because the downspouts were not running that way. None of these trees were watered by their new homeowners. This homeowner on the right did eventually open up the mulch area under the tree a little bit. But this is just a good example of things that get watered versus things that don't get watered. It makes a huge difference. If you've got real problems, like that root girdling, or you're seeing scorch on your leaves, or the crown is dying back, it pays to call a certified arborist to ask for some advice. They may say, well, you've got some more time in this tree, or they may be like, well, just keep an eye on it because it's on its way out. There are some things that you may not be able to do anything about. It's just the way it would be. But at minimum, if you can do those basic management practices that we have said about mulching and watering, planting correctly, that will get you further than doing nothing. And if things do go south on a tree and you can't keep it, then consider leaving some of it, the trunk, left for wildlife purposes. You can leave between 6 to 15 feet of a trunk, and as small as 3 inches of diameter for insects to use, for woodpeckers to make homes in. So consider that. All right, questions.
We have a few questions about mulching and then one about pruning. So one question we have is about correcting for volcano mulch in a yard. The questioner has a tree that's about 9 years old. She says it, or I'm not sure if it's a man or woman. It seems to be doing okay, but just wants to rectify the volcano mulch situation. So how would you suggest that they go about doing that?
Just pull it away from the tree. Just go out there with gloved hands and just pull all of that mulch away from the trunk of the tree, from the base of the tree. Pull it out and just open it up and let the area that's been covered, dry out, basically. If you do want to remulch, then think through doing it in the proper way, getting some fresh mulch, maybe doing more of that donut type shape around the tree, making sure you're going out to the drip line. And I've done this before. I've been at something and planting or doing something, and I turned around and saw trees in mulch, and I was like, in the volcano mulch, I'm like, we're doing all this native planting over here, and then over here we've got all these trees in volcano mulch. I'm like, this doesn't go, so a couple of us just went over and just started moving it away from the tree and letting the tree dry out.
And then this question actually ties into the next question, which is about best practices for removing lawn as you expand your mulch ring. And so do you have any tips on best practices for removing the lawn as you spread the mulch?
One thing you want to avoid, as I mentioned before, you don't want to use plastic or even heavy cardboard to kill your grass, because what you do with those heavy things is you end up sort of solarizing your soil at the same time. You're killing the biome underneath. So if you can, in my opinion, the best way to do this is to do it bit by bit. So if you have a tree and you want to expand out, very carefully take something like a hand mattock and just gently start to move the ring of lawn that's around away. So I use that. I just kind of get it up a little bit and start to roll it. I mean, as you've seen, if the way they put lawn down, it's just rolled out. It's just rolled out like a carpet. If you can just get a good hold with some of this, with a piece of your grass, you can actually just start to pull it up with your hands and roll it out again. I would just do it gently. I wouldn't use anything aggressive. I wouldn't use like a pickaxe or anything like that. Just hand tools. What I do with my bed sometimes is I just make another, go out another foot every fall or whatever. Just make it a little bit wider so that I can handle it. And then you can just take that grass and basically just kind of turn it over, let it compost and use it, break it up and use it as a material in your beds. You don't have to throw it into a bag to send it off to the recycling at all.
One of the questions was about the mulch itself, and just clarifying that you're suggesting chipped mulch rather than shredded mulch.
Yeah, hardwood chip is the best. That's the gold standard. After leaves, I want to say after leaves. And the shredded mulch is what we mostly have access to, because that's what's mostly available in the garden stores, or in any of the commercial centers for that. If you're having trouble getting chip mulch, if you want to make sort of a mixed mulch, using some leaves, some leaf compost, maybe from your county, if they make leaf compost, that's available for free, using some of the shredded, and you could do what has been called an artisan mulch, where you kind of mix things up, even broken sticks. If you have a lot of sticks in your yard, break them into little pieces and use those too as part of your mulch around your tree. That's always a good way to deal with that.
And then we just have a few pruning questions. One of them was just asking for an explanation or some clarification on why pruning dead limbs helps a tree.
Removing anything that's diseased or dead should be taken off. For one thing, if it's diseased, you don't want the disease to spread. If it's already dead, it's going to fall down, and you don't want to control the fall. You don't want it to just fall down on top of you. So anything like that should be taken down. And it could be done at any time. If it's diseased, you might probably want to clean your pruning tools with alcohol afterwards, so you don't spread the disease to any other part of the tree or other trees.
And then some other pruning questions. One was about a large, tall tree that has no foliage on the upper limbs, but it has foliage on the lower part. The lower part just seems healthier than the upper part. Like, how do you handle that type of tree?
That is probably, I'm not an expert, but it's probably a result of not enough water, because the tree is pulling water up from the ground into the roots up through the trunk. And if there's not enough water, it's just not enough water is going to get all the way up to the top of the tree. It's not a good situation. You could have an arborist come in and prune it back if it is actually dead. If it's just lost the leaves because of the recent lack of water we've had for the last month or so, this may be temporary. So you could wait till next spring to see whether it actually leaves out on the all the way up to the top of the crown. But if it doesn't, then you should have that pruned by an expert so that they don't massacre the tree.
Yeah, and I think also,
And then water more.
water more. Yeah, I mean, I would argue that for the fall, go ahead and give it a good mulching, maybe some
Mhm.
compost around the root system, and then wait to see what happens in the spring, and maybe make sure you give it some extra water. Actually, give it some water now, and then give it some extra water in the spring, and see how it does.
Yeah.
Sometimes letting things have another season, letting them go through one more time to see how they do, and then if it's just not looking good, probably having an arborist come and help you figure out what's going on. They'll be able to tell you whether it's dying or not.
Right. Trees often don't show problems until maybe a year or 2 more years past the time that the damage is actually done. Like if you put an addition on your house and you dig too close into the root ball of an existing tree, they may not show any symptoms of problems for several years. That's where the problem came from.
Mhm.
Another question is about a multi-trunk Virginia magnolia. It looks like the main trunk is leaning, possibly due to some strong winds from last year. And the questioner is wondering whether you have any tips on how to correct this leaning main trunk of the magnolia.
Okay, well, they naturally are multi-stemmed frequently. It's not going to be easy to correct that because it's been for a while. We had a lot of problems, a lot of questions this year after the heavy snow in January, and plants were knocked all the way down, and some of them were actually partially uprooted. You can try to dig down into the root ball, but I don't know how long the tree's been there. If the tree's been there more than maybe 2 years, I don't think that's going to be able to be corrected. It's really, the roots are too established. So then,
Again, an arborist might be the best. If it's a really large tree,
yeah,
and you don't want to lose it, it may be worth getting an arborist opinion.
if it's multi-stemmed, you could take out some or all of that particular stem, but it will change the appearance of the tree a lot. So I guess it depends on how bad it really looks.
And then just our last question from this section, how far away can you use bark nuggets for a path? How far away from a tree can you have bark nuggets for a path?
If you have a path or over, piece of your root system, that's okay. It's just using that solely as your material around the whole tree. You don't want them running right over top of your root flare or too close to a tree, right? You want it to be probably at least 3-5 feet away or something from a tree. But it's going to depend on what that person's yard looks like, how much room they have.
Right.
Just use your judgment.
How tall the tree is before the lowest branches come out, because you wouldn't want to walk under a tree that had branches down like 3 feet from the ground anyway.
Yeah, so I think my point was mostly just don't use bark mulch all the way around a tree
Yeah.
as your only mulching material. It's not as helpful as other types of mulch. I'm going to turn this over now to Molly, and she's going to talk about how to choose the right place for a new tree in your yard. Molly, it's yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. A lot of these numbers are going to be minimum numbers. If you can make them larger than that, that's ideal, but I know many people have fairly small yards in the urban area around DC. So you do need to look around and you need to look up, because most of us have power lines still running overhead, and trees and power lines are not a good combination. Any tree that's over 20 feet tall at its maximum growth, not when you buy it, but when it's at its mature growth, should be at least 25 feet to the side of a utility pole, because otherwise it's going to get tangled up in the pole, which is going to be not good for your utility line if the tree comes down. And what the power company will do is what you see in this picture. Just come and carve a hole in your tree. They've taken out the leader, which is really bad for the tree. They've unbalanced the tree so that each of those sides is unstable. It's a terrible situation and it looks horrible. So the only way to prevent that is plan ahead. Trees that are under 20 feet can be planted under the lines, but better to keep them as far away as you can. Plant at least 3 feet from sidewalks, driveways, patios, buried utilities. So that means that you're going to have to check where your buried utilities are, your cable lines, your water lines, electrical lines. And there's a service that we'll put a slide up later on where to call to find that out. But 3 feet is really a minimum, because as you see, as the tree grows, it extends its canopy over a sidewalk. And if you don't want to have to hack off a lot of the tree on one side in order for people to be comfortably past. And this applies to your fence line too, because your neighbor is legally allowed to trim any vegetation that hangs over into your yard. And so unless you happen to talk to your neighbor before planting a tree, make sure they're cool with it, but back it off. 3 feet is probably not enough. So for that sort of thing, because you don't want your tree to be shaved off on one side. It's going to be unbalanced, which means it's going to be unstable and it just will look terrible. Okay. And you also want to be careful how close to your house or other structure you put a tree. A lot of trees plant themselves, which is what happened in this picture. Well, no, they don't plant themselves. The birds and the squirrels and other animals do it for you. But you don't want trees or even large bushes very close to your house. You need to leave space for access to painting, for instance, or weeding or accessing your building. So keep it 20 feet away as a tree over 50 feet, 15 feet away as a smaller tree, and at least 10 feet away for the very smallest trees. And also 15 feet away from an established tree. It's fine to do a mixed planting. We'll talk about that a little more too, but you don't want it right up against the tree that you already have. You have to give each tree some space. And shrubs too. Same thing. Don't plant shrubs right up against your house. They may be tiny at first, but they're not going to be tiny for long. And then you're going to have to do a lot of pruning, which is work for you and not necessarily very attractive. So leave space for airflow, which is better for the health of the shrubs and the trees. One of our biggest problems we have here is fungal issues because we have such a humid climate. And if you crowd your plantings, that just makes it worse. Where you locate the trees is important, especially if you have a specific use for them in mind. So you need to know which way is east and west and north in your yard. Go out there with a compass. Most people have one on their cell phones, and just know the orientation. South, obviously, you're going to be getting the most sun, but the way the sun hits is going to be different depending on whether it's winter or summer. Summer sun comes down almost vertically, winter sun comes in at a much lower angle. So if you're trying to shade a particular area, you have to understand and work out where is the best location for your tree. Many people like to plant trees either for a windbreak to cut north wind, helps to with your heating bills, or to, in this urban area, to create a privacy screen between yourself and something that's unattractive or your neighbor's yard or whatever. You can do that. Usually you're using evergreens. It's fine to do that, but you should really stagger the plantings, not do it everything in just one straight line, but zigzag them. I use different types of trees or shrubs in between. You'll make a more attractive layout. And if one of the shrubs dies, you won't have a gaping hole that looks terrible. because you can fill it in with something else. You'll have a much more varied and interesting landscape to look at. You can see from the sort of the bird's eye view of the house, they have a windbreak there in the northwest, which is where the winter winds mostly come from. And then trees in the front of the house, probably on either corner to shade that. Those would be deciduous that would shade the house during the summertime, but allow sun to come in through the winter months when you want it to come in and help warm the house. What you're trying to do often is to shade your house, which cuts down on your heating bills in the wintertime and your AC bills in the summertime. And hard surfaces, perhaps you have a patio or even a driveway that, if it's black asphalt, will absorb a lot of heat, which it then will throw off onto your house or just into the environment. So if you shade those areas, you're keeping the whole environment cooler. So there's specific angles, shading west, northwest of the property to block the hottest afternoon sun. As we said before, shading the east and west facing windows with deciduous trees, just shading right by an AC unit, but don't put a tree or a shrub right up against the unit. You'll block the airflow. Put it out 10, 15 feet away from that. And dark surfaces that absorb the sun, and also foundation shrubs, but don't put them right up against your house. So all of those are ways of improving your energy bill expenses. Okay, this is the windbreak that I discussed. You can see that this is a mixed planting. We have some taller trees. We have some shorter trees. You can even layer in deciduous shrubs and flowering shrubs to make it attractive throughout the year. So that, and they've curved it, but they've also staggered the height and you can stagger toward you and away from you to make it more visually appealing than just a straight line. Okay, layering trees like that and shrubs is also really good for the wildlife, because you may want a tall evergreen to block out your neighbor's patio, but most birds actually live and feed at about what they call the mid-story level, between 5 and 15 feet from the ground. They'll fly up and perch higher, but their main life cycle is at a lower level. So it's great to have lower shrubs or trees for them to perch on. If you layer in some plants that berry or fruit, you're providing them with food besides the leaves for the caterpillars. So it's a safer environment for the wildlife and actually much more attractive for you. And there's just a brief list of some of the species that you might be able to include, depending on the size of your property. Your tall tree may not be in the tallest tree category. You might want to size everything down a little bit depending on the size of your property. And you also absolutely have to plan for how big a tree is going to reach a maturity. You may not be living in the house anymore to see it, but somebody else will. And if you understand how big your tree will eventually grow, both height and width, then you can plant it you can choose the right one to start with. You can plant it in the right place. You will have much less care because you won't have to prune it very much. And you will have a long-lasting, healthy tree that will improve and support the whole ecosystem. Don't look at the tree at the size it is, or a shrub at the size it is in a nursery. It's going to grow. It's amazing how people forget that plants are going to grow. So consider its mature, natural size. Actually, the labels in the nursery are not that helpful, because especially on shrubs, they'll give you the size for about maybe 8 years out, because most homeowners stay in their house an average of 8 years. And so if you buy the shrub, you may not be concerned after that time, but somebody's going to be living there afterwards, and they will be concerned. So you can find this information in the publications we listed for you in the resource list, or in material from extension services in your area, so that you can, as we keep saying, right plant, right place. And one thing to keep in mind, if you're looking for berries or fruit from your trees, some trees are dioecious. They are male and female on different plants. So hollies are probably the best known of this group. If you're going to want berries from your holly, whichever species you get, which most people do, you're going to need a male pollinator for that. Now, you might be able to depend on a neighbor providing that. If you already have a holly tree and don't have a male with it, then it's being pollinated by somebody else in your neighborhood. But to be sure, if you're planting in a new one, you should make sure that you get a male. Sometimes the males will be much smaller than the females, but you still need to do this. And that means you have to provide for space for 2 trees, depending on the size of the male pollinator. Okay, do we have questions on that section?
We have a question about planting a whip-sized tree near established shrubs. The questioner tried previously with a redbud, I believe, and it didn't work out well. The shrubs in question are viburnum, and she's just wondering if there's maybe too much root competition or if there's a certain amount of space that a tree should be away from established shrubs.
Yes, redbuds are probably considered among our smaller trees. I mean, viburnums get quite large, and if they're well established, yes, you're going to have to leave a pretty good space so that the redbud does get the water, it does get the nutrients that it needs to help it grow. So it's hard for me to give you an actual number. 10 to 15 feet is what I'm coming up out of my head, but a lot depends on the size of your yard, but yeah, it's better to, if you can, just plant the tree first, let it get a little bit established, and then layer in shrubs afterwards. But if that's not the situation you've got, then you just have to work around it.
And then another question was about limbing up a tree. In this particular instance, it's a pecan tree that's fairly large, but I guess just in general, at what size or age do you think it's okay to start limbing up a tree if you need some clearance?
Well, yes, the big question is if you need some clearance. If you don't need clearance, if it's not right along the sidewalk or right along the walkway into your house, you never have to do that. But you do have to be aware that the leaves are there for a purpose. The leaves are feeding the tree and giving it energy. And if you cut off too many limbs, you're cutting down on the overall strength of the tree. So I would do it minimally. I was going to address this a little later, but if you're planting a tree, you shouldn't do it at least for about 2 to 3 years, I would say, because the new trees need every leaf they've got to feed the roots to establish themselves. So hold off as long as you can, do it very judiciously. If you do it, cut all the way, well, watch the pruning video, but cut all the way to the branch collar of the trunk. Don't cut off the branch halfway.
Okay. And then I know we have some questions about a reasonable size for tree purchase and where to purchase plants and trees, but I know that's coming up ahead in your presentation, I believe.
Yes. If you're planting it yourself, you don't want it too big. Actually, you don't want it too big anyway, but certainly not if you're going to have to lift it because it's heavy. But we'll go into some more detail later.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, then we're all set. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So this is going to be a fairly fast run through on just a few of the native trees that are available, possible for you to plant in your yard. There are many others, and I encourage you to look through the sources that we have given you, especially the booklet from Plant Nova Natives, which you can get on their website, download it for free. And you can also look on our website, mgnv.org, for suggestions, which give you size, location, everything you need. So you've decided you want to plant a tree, but you still are hesitating about what to get. You have to look at your yard or the space where you're planting. How much space do you have? How big a tree can you actually fit comfortably into your area? That's one of the main things. What are your soil conditions? First, you need to do a soil test. You can look on our website to find a list of places to get soil test kits in Alexandria and Arlington. If you live farther away than that, then go to your county extension office and they should be able to provide you with a test kit. But you really need to know what your soil's like. How much sun or shade do you have already? You're planting a tree, you're going to create shade, but you may have a lot of shade from either neighbor trees or other trees on your property. So that makes a difference. Big trees generally like to have a fair amount of sun. Some of the smaller trees are well adapted to be what they're called understory trees and to have partial sun. And think about what trees or shrubs you already have in your yard that you want it to fit in well. But also, if you have, say, a holly tree and rhododendrons and azaleas growing happily, your soil is acid, and it's not easy to change the pH, acid to alkaline ratio, in your yard, especially over a large area. So if it's acid, go with a tree that likes an acid soil, which most of them actually do. It's harder to find trees that accept alkaline conditions. So you have to do a lot of thinking about the space, the soil conditions, the sun, or whether you can actually plant far enough away from a utility lines. Definitely check where your utility lines go into your house. All that has to be taken into consideration before you actually start looking at specific varieties. Here are some things to consider, but certainly not all. Trees for wet conditions, which are the tall ones, 75 to 100 feet. American elm is a beautiful tree, used to be widely planted in our cities. And then unfortunately, almost all of them died from Dutch elm disease in the 1920s. Breeders are trying to come up with a variety that can withstand this. They've been working on it. They've come up with some things. They're not quite as big as the original American elm. Another possibility that withstands wet but doesn't have to have wet things is the bold cypress. It's a tall tree and it is very distinctive. It has fall color, can withstand a lot of water, but it doesn't have to have a lot of water all the time. Sweet gum is another pretty tree. Many people object to the gumballs that fall. So if you're thinking about this and want to feed wildlife or whatever, maybe you want to find a place on your property that's not right where you usually walk. So maybe this works better for a bigger property. Okay, trees that like wetter conditions that are a little smaller. Black gum is a wonderful tree. It's one of the few trees that actually does form a taproot. So you have to buy it small. It's a little hard to find, but the native plant nurseries do carry it. But you want to plant it small so you don't damage the taproot. But it will get a nice fall color, as you see, and should be used more. River birches are good. I personally know one that lives outside my church. It will be in standing water for 2 or 3 days with no problem, but it's fine when it gets drier too. And the bark is very attractive in the wintertime. Okay, these are smaller trees, understory trees. Notice they're taking part to full shade. American hornbeam, that's not planted much either, but it's very attractive. It's one of the many trees that are called ironwood. So ask for it by its proper scientific name you see there, Carpinus carolinea. And the sweet bay magnolia, which is lovely. It has beautiful white flowers like the bigger cousin, the southern magnolia. They are also fragrant. And sometimes now that it's getting warmer, it will stay evergreen all winter. Not always evergreen, but can be. One of its common names is swamp magnolia, so you can tell it can stand a lot of water. These trees are really helpful for controlling water, especially as we get into more heavy storm conditions and with the climate change. Okay, but there are also trees that like to have it a little on the dry side. So if that's the way your property is, then you can go with several oaks, either the northern red oak or the white oak, which is a gorgeous, beautiful tree. It takes a couple generations to really get to its full size, but it's worth getting started with. Most of the oaks like it on the dry side, except for a few. There are some small oaks. Okay, for the slightly smaller ones, the black cherries, they're not a gorgeous tree. People probably don't plant them much, but they are wonderful for wildlife. They support a tremendous amount of wildlife, both with the little cherry fruits that you see in the picture, and also with the leaves. There are hundreds of varieties of insects that will be supported by a black cherry. So if you have a space for it, it's a great one to do. And the persimmons also have fruit for the wildlife. And but this is one that you have to have a pollinator. So don't forget that. And finally, our state tree, the flowering dogwood. It's small. It likes a little bit of shade, but it's a beautiful, beautiful tree. It's beautiful every season of the year, even in the winter. And sassafras the same way. That again, you'll have to probably get at a native plant nursery, but they're an interesting tree. They've got sort of a long history of folklore. The bark and the roots have been used for drinks. So it's an interesting one to have, and the leaves are fun too. All right, now there's some trees that really don't care whether it's wet or dry, and the fringe tree is a lovely one. It has male and female trees, but it's a beautiful tree when it blooms, and then it makes these fruit that is good for all kinds of wildlife. And also the serviceberry, which blooms early in the spring and then makes these attractive fruits, which you can eat. They are alternate host of the cedar apple rust. And so if you want to have a healthy downy serviceberry, then you need to try to keep it away from red cedars. And another one that's great for all sites is a redbud. It's not too tall, it goes up to about 30 feet and is not fussy about damp or dry conditions and grows easily. Here are some native evergreen trees if you're looking for screening or for windbreaks. The red cedar grows energetically, it plants itself all around, but you should know that as it grows taller and taller, the lower branches naturally drop off. So that's, if you're going to plant it for a screening, you should plan to be able to put some shrubs beside it to block the lower part of the trunk. American hollies will keep their limbs right down to branches, right down to the ground. Many people limb them up for reasons I can't understand, but unless you have to walk under it, there's no reason to do that because they have a nice pyramidal shape. And then the arborvitae, which is sold widely and is a great tree for screening. Okay, now we're down to planting your particular tree that you have agonized about and researched and have decided that this is what you're going to get. It's going to fit in your spot and you're going to either plant it yourself, or if you're going to have the nursery plant it, I strongly advise you to stand over them when they're doing it, because the source of many, many tree problems is in the planting. And so if you can get it planted right, you'll be on the way to having a happy tree you'll enjoy for many, many years. When you decide to go out and buy that tree, go yourself to the nursery or the donation site. Don't have them just deliver a tree sight unseen to your doorstep, because I can guarantee you're not going to get the best selection on the lot. So you have to go there, and these are the things you need to look for. Something that's not too tall, less than 3 feet in height. Now that sounds weird if you're what you want is a tree, so that will get nice and tall. But trees actually transplant better when they are very small. If you plant a small specimen, it will grow faster than if you plant a specimen that's, say, 6 to 8 feet tall, that is sustaining a lot of transplant shock because it's lost about 90% of its root ball by being dug up. So this is going to look tiny at first, but you will be surprised how fast it grows. Just like humans, that you do your most growing proportionally in the first year of your life. Okay, so you want one that's nice and straight, and the leader that goes straight up and no competing branch that's very close to it. If there are any limbs, it should be coming out at a nice broad angle, about 45 to 60 degrees, and that should have potential branches all around it. If you looked at the bird's eye view circle picture down on the lower right, you see how ideally they're all coming off. That keeps the tree nice and balanced. You don't want crossing branches. They're going to rub and damage each other. And then you want to check the root ball. You may not be able to do this if this is burlapped, but if it's in a pot, what you can do is check how the tree is coming out of the soil, whether it's in a root in a burlap or whether it's in a pot. If it's coming out of the soil straight, like looks like a telephone pole, that tree has not been planted and cared for properly. You are not seeing the root flare. You should be able to see the top of the roots spreading out from the bottom of the trunk. And if possible, you should be able to, if you can, actually take it out of the pot, if it's a potted one, and see whether the roots are completely compacted and beginning to circle around, which is not a good thing either. So be fussy. You're putting a lot of money into this. As far as digging your hole, call Miss Utility, dial 811. I think this is true all through Virginia. They will come out within a couple of days and put little flags in as different colors depending on what's under the ground, because you don't want to plant a tree on top of your sewer pipe and then discover 10 years later that there's an issue with the sewer pipe and you have to get rid of your tree in order to reach the sewer pipe. So this is the time to be sure that the tree is well away from these utility things. In fact, you should do this before you even go to buy the tree, because this, if you have utility lines, that's going to make a difference to where you're going to put the tree. And don't dig when the soil is really wet, because it just destroys the soil structure. It's going to be very compacted and it's not going to drain properly. So these are things to be aware of before you start digging. Okay, so either you or somebody else is going to dig a hole, and it's going to be a very wide and surprisingly shallow hole, because what you're trying to do is loosen the soil in a wide circle around your tree so that the roots will spread easily, but you don't want it to put it deeper. Remember, the root flare has to be above the ground, at or just above the ground level, so you could see it. So you can see in the picture that the root balls should be sitting on firm soil. So you don't want to dig down. Digging down and then filling in is not ideal, because the tree is going to sink as the air compacts out of that soil. So measure your root ball and measure as you dig. Don't put anything else extra into the soil. No fertilizer, no extra potting soil, anything like that. This tree has to get used to the soil it's going to live in all the time. If you do that, you're creating a giant pot, especially in our clay soil, a giant pot around the tree, and the tree roots will go to the edge of that pot and never go any further, so that your tree will be always more unstable. So just use the soil you've got. Take off everything on the root ball. This is where the commercial people do you wrong, because they say, oh, the burlap will rot. The burlap doesn't rot. Your tree will die. You can dig down and you'll see the burlap just all around your tree again. Take off the wire if it's in a wire cage. Obviously take off the pot. And if it is in a pot, spread out the roots as much as you can. If there's broken ones, if there's ones that are circling around the pot, try to spread them out so that they're heading outward around the hole, and get a good start at spreading out and stabilizing your tree. And then start filling in with the native soil that you took out, nothing extra. Fill it in about halfway, water it so there isn't little air pockets that will dry out those fine roots that are going to, and the root hairs that are going to bring up the water for your tree. And then keep filling and watering until you're done. And when you're done, you should be able to see the top of the tree, of the root flare, just at the soil line. Okay, Staking. You don't really have to, often don't have to stake here. We don't get winds sweeping down the plains like they do in Kansas. There's too many buildings and too much other vegetation to break the wind. So unless the site happens to be very windy or on a slope, you don't need to stake at all. And really, it's better not to, because movement of the trunk actually strengthens the trunk. This is what people don't understand. It's just like your arms and legs. When you exercise them and move them, they get stronger. But if you feel you have to, put the stakes way outside the root ball. You can see where they're going down in this picture. The root ball's in the center, looks kind of fuzzy, and the stakes are way out. I've seen lots and lots of trees with a stake right up against the trunk. It's driven right through the root ball because they've been staking the tree in the pot and then strangling it with a piece of wire, which is the worst way to stake anything. So you want 2 to 3 stakes and then soft ties that will not rub the tree bark, that will move with the movement of the tree as if it gets breeze. Take the whole thing away within 6 to 12 months, because if it needed temporary staking, it should be, the roots should be spread out beyond the original root ball. It should be able to hold the tree in the soil. If it's not, then you've got a problem that's way beyond staking to solve. So if you feel you have to do it, this is the way to do it. And then you need to water your tree. Now, if it rains, you don't have to put extra water on. So, but new trees need about 1 inch of water a week from rain or supplemental watering. So maybe you need a little wet rain gauge to actually measure how much rain you're having for maybe the first year. An example is, in order to put 1 inch of water down, what do you actually have to do? So if you have a tree in a 5-gallon pot, which is about the size of those orange Home Depot pots or buckets, you'll need a 5-foot diameter hole for your tree, but you need to water beyond that. So if you have a 3-foot diameter hole, you need to water a 5-foot diameter area. Because what you want to do is encourage those roots to go out, out, out. That's what stabilizes the tree. That's how they get more water as they get bigger and to grow properly. So to water 12 inches deep, which is what you want to do, you'll need to water with the hose running on low for at least half an hour. If you're using a sprinkler, you need to run longer, probably about 45 minutes, because the sprinkler slows down the flow of water. If you are using a soaker hose, which is good, but you'll have to water now for an hour because those run even less strongly. So that's the rule of thumb. You have to get down to about 12 inches deep, because that's the minimum distance that your root ball is at that point in time. Don't water it once the ground is frozen, because the roots won't be able to take up water at that point, and you're just creating an ice ball around their roots. Do put on mulch, but not against the trunk, and spread the mulch as widely as you can. The drip line is going to be very small if you put in a 2 or 3 foot tree, but it will get bigger quickly, and it's better to put the mulch out and create a non-turf area if that's what you're planting into early in the game. And don't prune it for the first 3 years unless something, a branch actually breaks, because they need all the top canopy they've got in order to create the vigor for the roots to grow. Fall is the best time to actually plant a tree or a shrub, because they're not trying to put out, the trees are not trying to put out leaves. They're not using energy to put out fruit. They can put all their energy into developing their roots and getting really sturdily settled. Usually the weather is cooler, there's not so much stress. By the time that the spring comes and they're ready to put out leaves again, their roots will be quite well established. So this is a great time, and for a tree up into November, maybe even December, if the ground isn't frozen. For shrubs, you want to plant a little earlier. And also in the fall, you get more rain often, more, so it's much less stressful for the tree to be planted in the fall. And consider, if you want to make the mulch bed as wide as you possibly can, consider putting in mixed plantings. Let the tree develop for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then you can start layering in shrubs, ground covers, anything like that.
Thanks very much, Molly. We have one question about the old tree adage about whether, about tree growth and whether it sleeps in the first year, creeps in the second year, and then leaps in the third year. Do you find that generally true for tree growth?
Well, they're certainly establishing their roots first. So yes, in the first year, you may not see a tremendous amount of growth above ground. But if you've done it right and faithfully water, then I think, yes.
Another question is just about your thoughts, if you have any specific thoughts on American smoke tree versus a hackberry.
I personally do not. If Amy knows anything, I'm not. I didn't realize there was an American smoke tree.
I think they're different, very different sizes, if I recall.
Mhm.
Hackberry can be very large. It can be huge. It can almost be the size of a white oak. When it's at full maturity. I think the smoke tree is a smaller tree. So just on that case, they're both good trees. Just check to make sure you understand the habit of the tree in terms of how large it's going to be and how much space you think you'll need,
Right.
to let it grow as well as it can. I think they're two really different sizes. So, but I won't swear to that. Do your research. That's my my suggestion.
And then we had, I think this might be our last question about plantings. Oh, sorry, a few more have popped up, but one was about plantings underneath a tree and about the timing of it. Did you suggest waiting 3 years, and what was the rationale about that?
I did say wait 3 years before pruning a tree, your tree. If you plant it right away, a shrubs grow faster than trees, and so you don't want to overwhelm your new tree with perhaps the shrub that might shade it too much, like the person who is having trouble planting in a tree around established viburnums. So let the tree get its dominance a little bit and then start adding in some things. You could put in ground cover right away that stays low. That would be fine. The thing with mulch is that weeds will start up in it. And if you plant in something else that you actually want to have, those will crowd out the weeds. So that might be an advantage.
I would add that I know I've done this, and I'm sure others have too, is I put a tree in and then I planted some herbaceous plants around the tree, which needed sun. And then the tree grows and then there's shade. And then the plants that I have put in are no longer the right plants. They either just kind of die back or they look terrible. And I realized I've got to put in plants that, need shade or can take shade. So I would recommend that if you're going to put in some herbaceous plants, look through the Plant Nova Natives book and find plants that can take partial sun to partial shade first, because they'll be able to withstand some shade, but you may over time have to kind of edit in some new plants as your tree shade gets thicker and deeper. Ferns are always a great one. Even just your hostas are not native, but they're good to put a couple of those in. You're just trying to fill it out a little bit. I've made that mistake before, and it's easy to do because you're just like, you've got all this space and all this sun, and you're like, yeah, and everything looks great for about 3 years or so, and then the shade starts dominating, which is what you want, but then the plants you put in don't quite work. So if you're just aware of that, and are willing to, put some different things in later, or try to find plants that will, and there are a number of native plants that will take a little bit of sun, a little bit of shade, kind of split the difference.
You may find that the sun-loving plants will naturally migrate out to the edges of your planting bed as the tree produces more shade. That often happens, but it is really good to have a large non-turf area around your tree. If you just dig a little hole and plop the tree in and have turf almost up to the tree, potential for damage from mowers and from string trimmers is really big. And they can really, especially something like a dogwood, they can really kill them. So if you do have mower damage to a dogwood bark. So having a big bed around your tree is really much more advantageous to the tree. And once you get say a mixed planting established around the tree, it looks really nice. It looks better than just a tree stuck in the middle of the lawn and another tree stuck in the middle of the lawn. You have a really attractive thing where you can have things of interest going on all year round.
There was one question about best practices when digging small volunteers to donate to others. Seems like they have 1 foot to 3 foot tall tulip poplars, red oaks, and sycamores.
If they want to do that and pot them up, we do have a program, which I should have mentioned earlier, Small Trees, Big Canopies, in which we take volunteer trees like that that have grown up in the place where they're not appropriate, and pot them up and give them away to people who want to plant a tree. And on our website, under programs, you will find that link, and it will have a list of where we're doing donation events. So that's a great place to get a tree for free, and they will be native trees.
Yeah, and I think too, even if you have trees in your own yard, you want to move around, this is a place to get some information. As Molly had mentioned before, there are a few trees that do have a tap root, like a redbud usually has a pretty long tap root, a persimmon, American persimmon, a red cedar does. So you need to get them really small, because if you wait too long to move them, you'll break the tap root and they won't survive. Yeah. So it's a very nice program. So yeah, I just wanted to, was there another question, Nicole?
Well, there was one about where to buy native trees, but I believe that you have that information in the handout.
Yes,
That was given prior to the presentation, and there's also on the mgnv.org website, we have lots of resources too about finding native shrubs, native trees, native plants.
Plant Nova Natives has a list of both native plant nurseries that are in our area, and also of periodic native plant sales that come maybe in the spring and the fall. They also have a list of landscapers who will work with native plants if you're not willing to do the work yourself. So that they are a great resource.
We had a section on that resource sheet that talks about in our area where you can go get trees either for a very nominal price or even for free.
Yeah. Yes, the trees say at Earthsanga are small, but they are also very inexpensive compared to a commercial nursery. And I think they probably do better in the long run if you plant it correctly.
And all of our resources on MGNV, along with a number of other videos. There's a great video from our colleague Elaine Mills, who talked about celebrating native trees, and she's got more information on lots of other kinds of specific trees. So plenty research to be done.
I think somebody asked whether they would be sent the link to the final recording. No, we don't do that. But if you go on the website, you can find the link to the recording there. So
in about 2 weeks. Yeah.
Thank you everybody for coming.
Molly, yes.
Enjoy. Go out and plant a tree.
Right. Thank you all. Thank you all for spending your beautiful Friday morning with us.
Yes.
Thank you. Have a
Take
great
care.
weekend, everyone.